Welcome back to another IPS Take feature here on our YouTube channel at Inside Pack Sports. If you haven't yet, please subscribe at Inside Pack Sports and also check out the website, www.insidepacksports.com, where we have plenty of premium content on NC State. But as you can tell by the headline, we are discussing Paul Mbiya. I'm sure a lot of you are coming here today to find out what happened with Paul Mbiya. Well, whose fault was it? Was it anyone's fault at all? I have my man Jake McSwain with me on audio today. He's taking care of some daddy duties, so he's not able to join us on camera. But Jake, you're there, and you saw everything kind of break on Wednesday when Scotty Ebube committed, and then that was kind of the writing on the wall for others that something was likely about to go down with Mbiya, who had yet made his way to campus.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that if you were a subscriber on IPS, it's something we had warned about for some time, and there seemed to be some resolutions there for this at the very least. But as the world turns, and you'll get into it, things change. But this is something that we kind of had out there a couple of days ago before everything broke down, and it wasn't a complete surprise.
Yeah, and as you can tell, I'm here in the studio here today. My office is there's some lawn care being done outside, so a little different backdrop, but I wanted to kind of point that out. So, Jake, let's get into it. The initial Mbiya decision, it honestly, it kind of came out of nowhere when he first committed to NC State, because we had heard a couple of weeks prior to that he was no longer an option for NC State. All signs had pointed to him heading to Oregon. I think financially, though, he came down maybe a little bit on what he was looking for. It fit more in NC State's wheelhouse. And at that point in time, State did not have a commitment from Darian Williams. They did not have a commitment from Vin Allen Lubin. And they were expected to land Musa Sanya, another international prospect who was going to come in with Mbiya and likely be that kind of stabilizing force, right? He was a guy who had more experience, could be kind of that floor piece that you could rely on if Mbiya simply wasn't ready, because we know there are some raw elements to his game. Jake and I taped a film room on him. You can check that out if you want more of our thoughts on him as a prospect. We're very high on Paul Mbiya, right, Jake? But we both admit he's still raw.
Yeah, he was absolutely a raw prospect, but he had parts of his game that we really liked and thought were going to translate extremely well. It's just a matter, of once the circumstances started to change, and I'm sure you'll get into that, then I think NC State's focus on winning now and setting themselves up to be super successful dictated that they make some decisions.
Yeah, and what changed? Well, initially, I think the biggest factor that changed was there was some wavering in terms of if Musa Sanya would be an option for NC State. Because like I had said, he was expected to be that stabilizing force alongside Mbiya, to where if you're NC State, you could kind of limit the risk a little bit with him. But I think as things moved on, it seemed unlikely that Sanya would be able to make his way to NC State. Maybe there were some academic issues. We know this was a player who was older in terms of trying to get into the college level. And I think there was some pause there for sure, to where if you're NC State now, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, we have to be sure at the 5 position. We have somebody ready to go at the start of the year. And where things are now with visa issues for prospects, you've got eligibility issues. We talked about it at the time when Vin Allen Lubin committed, Jake. If folks go back to last year with Ishmael Duff, who I believe set out 2 games to start the season for NC State, this was a player who played 4 games professionally, I believe, in Canada. And he was in college in Canada, making a transfer from a Canadian school to NC State. He wasn't just a professional basketball player looking to make his way over. So if he set 2 games for that, you're NC State now, you're wondering, okay, how much would Mbiya have to sit? Will he have to sit? You don't know. And I think those red flags led NC State even more to start looking at Vin Allen Lubin. We know NC State liked Vin Allen Lubin all along. I believe personally, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe personally that Vin Allen Lubin was likely more expensive than Mbiya and Sanya, simply because he was more proven. I mean, this is a guy who had played at Notre Dame. He played at Vanderbilt. Last year, he had a big-time role for North Carolina as they made the NCAA tournament. Going into his senior year, And if you're NC State, you feel like this player going into his senior year it kind of fits a little more in line with the other players on your roster, Jake, because when Will Wade took over, he was open at the press conference. This is not a rebuilding project to him. Now, you had to go out and get 12 new players, so clearly you're rebuilding. But I think he was doing so under the expectation that they're going to be ready to compete right away. And when you look at it from that standpoint, and you're rolling out potentially a starting lineup of Trey Holloman, a senior, Terrence Arsenault, a fourth-year player, potentially an Allen Breed maybe, who's a fourth or fifth-year player, Darian Williams, a senior. Do you want to pair that with a 19, 20-year-old Paul Mbiya who you don't know how eligible he's going to be right away, if he's ready to go from a day one 30-minute a night guy for you? I think that played another factor in why NC State said, you know what, we need to solidify things with Van Allen Lubin.
Yeah, it seems to be the case, and there was a brief stretch there where Lubin wanted to be here, had made that seemed to have made that clear to the staff, but because of the situation where NC State was in, that wasn't something they could financially commit to at the time. So then you kind of saw Van Allen Lubin go into a holding pattern, and that's when I think NC State, their staff really had to make a decision. To your point, of how are we going to, if we don't make a move where we commit to Van Allen Lubin or kind of change our plan, then we're going to lose out on that. And in hindsight, it's clear what their choice was, and that was to roll with somebody who had no eligibility concerns, could step in right away and could play a role that they wanted him to, and had tape on the ACC level. So, it makes a lot of sense.
And for us at Inside Pack Sports, we thought that it was going to be highly unlikely that NC State would be able to have Van Allen Lubin and Paul Mbiya on the roster. 10, 15 years ago, you didn't have to worry about that. You had X amount of scholarships. You fill your scholarships. Once you fill them, you're done. But you're basically using scholarships to get players. Well, we now know with NIL, revenue share, budgets, different things like that, it's extremely tough to be able to get everybody you want. It just is. And so we thought, okay, when Van Allen Lubin came along, that likely meant NC State would have to go a different direction with Paul Mbiya. However, I think it was last week, Jake, or 10 days ago, things broke where behind the scenes we were starting to hear that Paul Mbiya at NC State had kind of come to a resolution on, I assume, his financial status. And from what we had heard, and we haven't heard numbers or anything like that, but we believe he took a massive pay. He would have taken a massive pay cut to go to NC State, but he wanted to. He wanted to play at NC State. He wanted to play for Will Wade, and I think it was resolved. So we started to get that out on our outlets, and it felt like, okay, the roster is now finalized. But then over the weekend, things changed, and folks are going to wonder, well, whose fault is this, right? Well, is Paul Mbiya out looking for more money? Is NC State in the wrong here? Honestly, Jake, I don't think either one is in the wrong here. I really don't. I think NC State was doing what they needed to do in terms of looking out for this season and making sure they're ready to go from day one. I don't, and to kind of, I guess, maybe give a different look as to why they would have changed their opinion. I'm not certain they would have taken a commitment from Paul Mbiya at all the first time around if they were not expecting to land Musa Sanya. Right? I think that gave them kind of the floor to go out and get Mbiya. So that changed, which now changed a lot of things for them at that position. And so I don't think NC State was wrong here, but I also don't think Mbiya and his camp and those around him are wrong. If what we've heard is accurate, we've not heard this just from the NC State side. We've heard it from a side connected to him as well, that financially for him, the best decision would be to decommit and explore his options. Because frankly, if we're being honest, in this era, financially, you need to do that. You need to look and evaluate all your options and understand that you have earning power now that you've never had before. So I think a player like Mbiya now, back on the free market, which he is, has a lot of value. And we'll talk about that in a second, but I do want to say it all kind of came to light, like we mentioned earlier, Jake, when State landed Scotty Abube, who is more like Van Allen Lubin than he is Paul Mbiya in terms of eligibility and fit. And I think that just kind of, the writing was on the wall for everybody else publicly what was about to happen then once they knew that Mbiya wasn't on campus either.
Yeah, James. And closing the loop on this too, I don't think either side thinks the other one's in the wrong. More importantly, than what we think, I don't think Paul Mbiya has any ill will against NC State, and I don't think that Will Wade and staff have anything wrong with Mbiya because, in fact, we've heard that they had even the first time around when things were looking like it wasn't going to fit financially, that they were doing what they could to help him find a landing place. So it's that speaks volumes to kind of the relationship they've developed.
So what does it mean for Paul Mbiya? Well, I just said it. He is now, I would imagine, the top available player on the market in college basketball. I mean, this is a guy who was committed to an ACC program with rare physical gifts, 6'11", 7'8" wingspan, athletic. Now, is he raw? Will he take some time? Yes. But I would be shocked if you don't see programs like an Oregon, Kansas, a Michigan State, programs like that just get involved with him and try to get him. Now, here we are. It's middle of June, and things are getting tight in terms of getting him on campus for summer. And so we'll see how quickly this moves. I believe a program to keep an eye on for him is Oregon. I think Oregon's been in the mix for him all along. He's already taken an official visit out there, and they went out and saw him in France as well. So I think that would be a program to keep an eye on with Mbiya. But yeah, I think he's going to be coveted. And I think at the end of the day, another kind of to Jake's point as to like being upset or anything like that, I think he's going to make out financially as well, if not better, than what he initially would have from NC State. And so if you're him, you're his agent, and that works out that way, yeah, maybe you didn't end up necessarily at the spot you wanted to end up at, but you ended up being compensated in the right way. And so what does it mean for NC State, right? What does it mean for NC State? Well, I think we know now with Scotty Ebube on campus, NC State's finished at the 5 position for the most part. You've got Van Allen Lubin, you got Scotty Ebube, and then you also have Jerry Dean. And you're going to get through those 40 minutes with those 3 guys. Before we get going, Jake, I know we talked about this on a recent Zoom call with Ethan. Do you feel like it's a competition with Ebube and Jerry Dean in terms of playing for those minutes behind Van Allen Lubin, who we're both projecting now to have a massive role?
Yeah, I don't know that competition is necessarily the right word. I think that both guys are going to come in with a little bit of a role. I think the competition is going to come down to how that timeshare splits out. And I think we've talked about it, James. I love that option of that lineup and having Jerry Dean at the 5.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if you're NC State, you've had now 2 or 3 weeks of workouts on campus where you haven't had Paul Mbiya, you haven't had Mikey Williams, obviously you haven't had Scotty Ebube. So at the 5 position, if you're doing scrimmages or different things like that, it's pretty much Van Allen Lubin and Jerry Dean. And I know they put a clip up on, I believe, their social media channels of Dean having an offensive rebound put back and get fouled by Van Allen Lubin. And it, kind of caught the eye of some fans. But I think this is an opportunity for Jerry Dean. It really is, because he's a player who I think NC State's very high on. And they landed him before they landed Darian Williams. We know Darian Williams is going to command a massive role at the 4 position, but State's going to still find minutes for Dean. And I was telling Jake last night, I think if I were a team scouting NC State and preparing for NC State, one lineup I would not want to see is Jerry Dean at the 5 and Darian Williams and Quadair Copeland and different guys like that at the other 4 positions, because there's not a 5 in the ACC like Jerry Dean right now. A guy who can shoot the ball as well as he can and stretch it out to the 3-point line as well as he can, to where defensively it puts your 5-man in a ton of tough spots. And so I think if you're NC State, regardless of if you landed at Ebube or even if you landed Paul Mbiya, you still are going to look to find minutes for Dean at the 5. So I wanted to add that in here because I don't think folks should look at this and say, well, is NC State in trouble at the 5 position? No, I don't think they are. I think you have Van Allen Lubin, you've got Scotty Ebube, you have Jerry Dean, potentially Mikey Wilkins can give you some minutes there as well. You have 4 options to play that position, and you have to just fill 40 minutes. And I think NC State's going to do that. So wanted to discuss the 5 position a little bit today. Obviously wanted to clear up some things on Paul Mbiya, what went wrong, what happened. It's a business. At the end of the day, it's a business, and we know now more than ever, money talks. And if you're a player who has representation and a family you have to look out for, ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to make the best decision for yourself and your family. And I think programs understand that. I think for NC State here over the last 4 or 5 days, they saw this coming with Mbiya. I think they expected it. I don't think they were upset by it. I don't think they were blinded by it. I actually think they were probably more surprised that they thought initially it had been fixed than for it to play out this way because of how it was resolved the second time around. So wanted to discuss that a little bit with you all. As I said at the beginning, if you haven't had a chance to do so, please subscribe at Inside Pack Sports here on YouTube. And also check out our premium platform, InsidePackSports.com, where we put out a ton of content daily. Thanks again, and we'll do it again here soon.